Today's episode is brought to you by Roosters, a noble grill in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They provide an upscale menu of Southern food and dishes with international influences made from local ingredients. More info on them at the end of the episode.
Welcome to the Semmax Way, the definitive podcast for mastering finance, investment, and retirement planning. Prepare to unlock the secrets to financial success as we delve into lucrative investment strategies and provide expert guidance towards a secure retirement. With over 20 years of experience, Semmax Financial Group has been dedicated to serving investors, and through this podcast, we aim to empower you with the knowledge to maximize your savings and achieve lasting financial freedom the Semmax Way. Whether you're a professional finance enthusiast, a high net worth individual, or part of a sophisticated investment group, this podcast is tailor-made for you. And now, here is your host, Matt Landon, financial advisor for Semmax Financial Group and licensed CFP.
Remember the words of the Lord Jesus that he said himself, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Acts 20, verse 35. That's something that I think is really important and resonates with me in a beautiful way. I think the idea of gifting is incredibly powerful, and we really do get more out of it than we give. And I'm not going to sit here and advocate for prosperity gospel or anything like that, but I don't think you can outgive God. I'll tell you that right off the top. Now, charitable giving is something that I think is oftentimes overlooked in a financial advisory conversation. Part of that, it comes from just advisors that don't want to get into it. I think part of that also comes from folks wanting to give just for the sake of giving. You're not trying to get ahead financially out of it. You're not trying to save yourself a huge amount in taxes or anything like that. You're giving because you want to. You feel it's the right thing to do. I think that's wonderful. I do believe that that's an area that should be explored a little bit. And that's what I want to talk about today. This is kind of a follow-up from our previous podcast, because if you're charitably inclined, if you're interested in gifting and giving to others, there's a couple cool things you want to do and keep in mind around that. Now, I'm going to take a step back for just 1 minute, and I want you to think about back in the day. Why do we have gift taxes? Why can't I just give whatever I want? Well, it's because they had an inheritance tax. So with inheritance taxes, they said, hey, you can't give more than a certain amount when you pass away, or you get taxed on it. Well, the result of that was some people said, great, I will just give it away while I'm living. Don't have anything when I pass away. No inheritance tax. So then they imposed gift taxes. Now, gift taxes, you can gift $17,000 without incurring any kind of gift taxes. On top of that, you can each gift. So if you have a spouse, right, you could give someone $17,000. Your spouse could give them $17,000. And again, that's not a taxable event. There's no issues. What if we get above that? What if you go over that $17,000? Well, that's where you've got to be careful, because that is considered a reportable event. And then that difference, you have to pay up to 40% in taxes on. Now, if you don't want to do that, what you can do is you can offset it against your estate exemption. And so what can happen is what you can leave tax-free from an estate standpoint gets reduced because you can give it while you're living. So you got to be careful around that. Here's another thing. If you have a large loan, let's say you give someone a loan, and normally market rates would be, I don't know, let's just say 12% interest on this loan, and you give it to them for 0% interest. And yes, they're making payments on it, but you're not charging them any kind of interest. And let's say it's $1 million loan. I'm using big numbers here, but so you can kind of understand the concept. It doesn't have to be that large. If you do that, that difference, that interest that you're not accruing, that is considered a gift. So because you're not charging them interest around market rates, or what would be considered an average rate from a market standpoint, that interest that you did not charge is considered a gift. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people are unaware of. Now, there's different ways you can do gifting. One thing I like is utilizing a trust as a way of gifting. You can put things into the trust. The trust dictates how they come out, and so you can have a little bit more control over those funds. Let's say, for example, you have a sailboat. I think that's a fun example because I think sailing is pretty neat. Don't know how to sail, but It's kind of neat. So let's say you have a sailboat and you love that sailboat and you want to leave that sailboat to a relative. You want to leave it to someone, but you put a restriction in there. You say, hey, the trust owns a sailboat. My family members have full rights and usage to it whenever they want, as long as they want, but they don't own it. They don't get to go sell it tomorrow if they want. If they don't use it, then the trust dictates, well, then it goes to, and it goes so on and so forth down the line. So you can gift someone something without turning over full operational control of it. Another thing is if you're gifting to a church or an organization, well, there's two ways that I really like to do that. One way is to utilize a QCD. So a QCD is a qualified charitable distribution, and that's something that when you're giving it out, you can give funds directly from an IRA account, and then you can gift it directly to a charity, and it doesn't count towards your income taxes. There are some rules around that. You have to be at least 70 and a half in order to do that, but that's a way to gift to the church without it triggering a tax bill. You can use that to cover part of your RMD as well. Another way, instead of a QCD, if you're under that age or if you're trying to do a larger itemized deduction, you could use a donor advised fund. A donor advised fund is an account that you can put a large sum into at one time, and you can take that off your income at one time, but then you maintain control of that donor advised fund. And as long as those funds are going into as long as they're going to a 501c3, as long as they're going to a charity, then you're able to disperse them out. So you maintain control of those funds, and you're allocating it towards charity without turning it loose all at one time. I love that, especially if you're giving to a church, but you say, hey, I'm giving to this church this much, but I might want to allocate some of those funds. Instead of giving it over 3 years, I'm going to front end load it at one time, take a huge itemized deduction, do the standard deduction over the next 2 years, but I don't necessarily want to give all those dollars right now because I may want to allocate some of it towards a missionary or towards a building fund or a different project or something along those lines. So I think that's a really cool way to utilize things. I do also think there's some benefits to gifting stocks and houses and things of that nature. You have to be careful because if you pass along a home or if you pass along a stock, you're passing along your cost basis as well. So when we're talking about gifting, if you pass on a house, if you pass away, they get it at a stepped up cost basis. Same thing with a stock. So you want to be careful about what you're gifting. If it's an appreciated asset or if it's something that's going to appreciate, you may want to be careful as far as giving it in your estate versus giving it while you're living. These are the kinds of things you want to be careful with, and talk with your CPA, talk with your attorney, those kinds of things. I think it's always important to have a strong team, but your financial advisor should really be considered like a quarterback, where they're looking at things, making sure that your overarching plan, your overarching theme is being built out the way you want. We all have different goals and we all have different desires. I think it's important to make sure that we're aligned. Your plan, your financial plan, your funds, everything is aligned in a way that ultimately reaches your goals in the best way possible. I hope this has been helpful. I'll get into it a little bit more at another point, but this was just kind of a highlight, quick level thing around gifting. This is the kind of thing I think it's important to have a conversation with your advisor about. It's also important to have a conversation with your loved ones about. If you're wanting to give a gift, I think it's important to make sure your loved ones have a voice. I think there's a big difference between having a voice in a situation and having a vote. You're not letting your kids or someone else have the decision. They don't have a vote in how you have your estate set up or what you give when you're living versus when you pass away, etc. But I do think a voice is nice. They might have some input on whether or not they would love to keep the family farm in the business and in the family, or if they're not interested in that and they'd rather sell it and do something else. So those kinds of things, that voice can have an impact and provide insight in how you may want to have your funds set up. But I don't think they should ultimately decide for you how you have things set up or what you choose to do with your charitable inclination, whether that's to a charity or whether that's to a loved one. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been helpful. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Semmax Way. If you're not completely satisfied with your current financial advisor, give us a call for a second opinion. Please note that this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content shared on the Semmax Way should not be considered as investment advice. It is always recommended consult your licensed investment representative and a competent tax advisor, respectively, for your fiduciary needs and plans. No statement contained in the Semmax Way podcast or made by its producers, sponsors, host Matt Landon, or Semmax Financial Group is a recommendation. Semmax Financial Group and Matt Landon are not responsible or liable for investment value loss of any kind from any action taken based on information discussed in the Semmax Way podcast. Any opinions or viewpoints in this podcast are shared for information and entertainment purposes only and are not financial advice. We do encourage you to conduct further research and seek personalized advice for your specific financial circumstances. Full disclosure available at semmax.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you tune in for future episodes of the Semmax Way.
I'd like to pause a minute and just express our gratitude to our podcast sponsors, Noble's Food and Pursuits. This renowned restaurant group has been serving the community for an impressive 40 years, starting with Jim Noble's original restaurant, J. Basil Noble in High Point. Over the years, their passion for hospitality has flourished, leading them to expand into a diverse collection of 9 restaurants, a retail bakery, and a catering company. Today, we want to shine a spotlight on one of their beloved establishments, Rooster's A Noble Grill, which has been proudly open for 31 years right here in Winston-Salem. Now, Roosters is known for its commitment to offering a seasonally inspired, regionally cultivated menu featuring mouth-watering wood-fired meats, poultry, and vegetables. If you're looking for a delightful dining experience, they also host monthly wine dinners and provide live music on their inviting patio every Tuesday night. Now, make sure to pay them a visit at 380 Knollwood Street, and to secure your spot, head over to theroosterskitchen.com and make a reservation. Again, that's roosterskitchen.com.